Now we all know that playing with fire is inherently dangerous, but there are some additional risks that are very specific to fire manipulation. In this video, I'll talk you through some of the less obvious dangers associated with fire manipulation, and more importantly, how to mitigate those risks. One of the more commonly talked about risks is inhalation of fire. Many people believe that if you take a deep breath with fire in your mouth, fire will pass down your throat, you'll scorch your lungs, and it is game over. And while this is widely believed, the science doesn't quite check out. There are multiple factors that make it impossible for fire to even exist in the lungs. So why am I even talking about it? That's because the hydrocarbon-based fuels that we are using are toxic. They are bad for your health. And while fire can't survive in the lungs, fuel vapor absolutely can. And our lungs have a huge surface area and are by far the single most effective pathway for our bodies to absorb this toxic fuel. But fortunately for us, this is a super easy risk to mitigate. And before we put a fire-eating torch in our mouth or draw any vapor, we're going to take a nice big deep breath and hold that breath for the duration of the technique. And by doing so, we are going to make ourselves incapable of taking a significant breath while vapor is in our mouths. There simply isn't enough room left in our lungs. Now when I say take a deep breath, your lungs don't have to be 100% full. If we fill our lungs to full capacity, it's going to make movement difficult, which can become a risk in itself. Instead, fill your lungs to around 80 or 90%, whatever feels the most comfortable without being too restrictive. And if you do this, breathing in any further will feel very forced and is unlikely to happen, even if your body reacts unexpectedly. If you were to take another short breath in, fuel vapor would likely never even get past the throat, which means it's unlikely to get as far as the lungs. And once we have successfully or unsuccessfully completed our technique, breathing that air out of our lungs will force any remaining vapor out from our mouths. You can then feel free to breathe easy. Unfortunately, while our lungs are by far the most effective, they aren't the only pathway for our bodies to absorb fuel. Whenever we put a fire-eating torch in our mouths, the liquid fuel on the torch is vaporizing. And due to our mouths restricting the airflow, much of that vapor doesn't get burnt off. Whether we're eating fire or drawing vapor intentionally, vapor is going to collect in our mouths. Now our mouths do a pretty good job of protecting us from this fuel vapor. That is because hydrocarbon-based fuels are not soluble in water due to them being non-polar, and therefore will not mix easily with our saliva. And when not 100% effective, our saliva creates a very strong barrier to entry. Also, our oral mucosa is very effective at absorbing water-soluble compounds such as medications, but fortunately for us, it has a much harder time absorbing fuel vapor. Now, while these fuels aren't soluble in water, vapor can condense into tiny droplets of fuel and get trapped inside our saliva. And because we habitually swallow our saliva, we run the risk of swallowing very small amounts of fuel. Now, on their own, these small quantities shouldn't pose much harm. However, over time, repetitively ingesting small amounts of fuel can compound into much larger amounts of fuel, which is why we need to develop some good habits to keep fuel ingestion to a minimum. If during a burn you have had fuel vapor in your mouth, try and be mindful of not swallowing your saliva. If you accidentally swallow it, or if you're in a performance where spitting into a bucket might not be stage appropriate, then swallowing every now and then isn't going to be a big deal. The more you swallow though, the more fuel your body is going to be exposed to. And once your burn is finished, you'll need to rinse out your mouth and spit out the contents a couple of times. Now remember, this fuel is not water soluble, but you will be getting rid of most of what was trapped in your saliva. Plain water is effective at this, however, adding a drop of dish soap to your water will help break down those hydrocarbon bonds. If nothing else, this is an effective final rinse to round off your performance session. Just make sure that you spit it out when you're done. While completely avoiding fuel ingestion is nearly impossible, good habits can massively reduce your exposure. Now I've been on both sides of good habits and poor habits, and as a result, I've experienced the effects of fuel toxicity. Recognizing symptoms is important, as it's our body's way of telling us that we need to change something, whether it be training or performance frequency, or just a reminder to reinforce good habits. Symptoms of fuel toxicity can include, but aren't limited to, drowsiness, nausea, abdominal pain, headache, dizziness, and in some more extreme cases, vomiting, slowed reflexes, and difficulty thinking clearly. Now everyone's body is different, but for me personally, when I don't have good habits, the worst symptoms I experienced were a very light stomachache, and I also felt a little bit lethargic. Now fuel ingestion can be taxing on our bodies, so it's important to take breaks. I recommend having at least a full day's rest from fire manipulation, but ideally 2 or more days to allow your digestive system to fully recover. And if you're feeling any of the symptoms I mentioned, listen to your body. Firstly, look at your habits. Have they slipped? If your habits are all good and you're taking at least a day's break between training, you need to look at shortening or reducing the intensity of your training sessions. Now, this doesn't mean you have to stop training entirely. Fire manipulation is multifaceted. There are so many things that you can work on. You could work on jellyfishes, unlit sequencing and choreography, and even just researching the science behind the technique you're trying to achieve can be super helpful. Working on these aspects during your downtime will make you a much more well-rounded fire manipulator, and a healthier one. Now, when it comes to fuel entering our digestive system, our liver and kidneys are going to be doing the vast majority of the heavy lifting when processing these fuels. Once these fuels enter the body, there's little you can do about it. A healthy body is going to be most effective at processing this fuel. Anything that promotes good liver and kidney function is going to go a long way towards keeping you healthy. And while it should go without saying, you should never ever be playing with fire under the influence of alcohol. Alcohol is also very stressful on your liver, so if you've had a heavy night's drinking, your liver is already going to be compromised and you should wait 48 to 72 hours before taxing it any further. Over the years, I have been exposed to more fuel than the vast majority of fire manipulators, and to this day, I have not felt any negative long-term effects. Now, when I first moved into fire manipulation as a career, I started having liver and kidney function blood tests every 6 months. I now have these tests as part of my regular blood test every 3 months, and up until now, fuel exposure has had no measurable effects on my body. Now, to recap this video, the fuels we are using are toxic. They are bad for your health, but our first line of defense is developing good habits. Nice, deep, held breaths to protect your lungs, and frequent rinsing and spitting to protect your digestive system. Coupling this with deliberate resting periods should keep you practicing or performing for many years to come. That's because hydrocarbon fuels are snot? Hydrocarbon fuels are snot. If nothing else, this is an effective final rinse to round off your performance or training session. Just be sure to spit it out. Be sure to spit it out. If nothing else, this is an effective final rinse to round off your performance or training session. Your training session. Oh, I've been doing this for too long. Maybe I should take a break. I'm hungry. Vomiting, slowed reflexes. It's a hair. I had a hair in front of my eye, and I have no idea where it came from. Oh, I got hopeful for a second there.